Well, what does our trans message need to be? Like, I think there's a really good argument that we lost this election from having a really extreme message on trans stuff, things I don't agree with. Fringe trans politics have given the Republicans everything they need to attack people like me, even when it's policies that don't help people like me. We lost because working class people don't associate the Democratic Party for standing for their interests anymore. And frankly, despite losing Roe, abortion is not the only issue that women care about. Being able to afford childcare or groceries. We can spend the next 4 years attacking Trump, and I'm sure a lot of us will. I'm far more interested in building a brand for the Democrats that is relatable and sellable politically.
We have very different viewpoints on many things.
But a lot of these issues are American issues. They're not Republican or Democrat issues.
Today on Elevated Thoughts, we're joined by Brianna Wu, video game developer, activist, and former congressional candidate. Known for her fearless advocacy on tech reform, online harassment, and progressive policies, Brianna will hopefully offer us a nice view on her perspective on the left and the right, which is what we try to do here. So thanks for joining us, Brianna. How are you today?
I thought I would just come on in and crash your party. So bam, I'm in your podcast like the Kool-Aid woman. There we go.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on.
It really is.
Is it really a pleasure? I don't think
Oh,
that's
very
true.
much so,
I don't
actually.
think that's true.
I think we're very aligned, actually. It's funny. I've been following your content because much like you, even though I find myself as a member of the left, I feel alienated because I support a lot of the same issues that you do that crosses the party line, if you will.
It's kind of gone a little nuts this year.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little weird. It's a little weird.
Well, that's a great segue. I mean, if you've watched our show, and many of our listeners know that I'm the right-wing pundit on the show, and Mike is the left-wing pundit. And
a right-winger. I can't. I'm sorry, I'm a progressive. I can't talk to people I have disagreements with.
Well, that's a great place to start, actually, because and that's one of the reasons it actually is our privilege and pleasure to have you on here. You're someone who's kind of been canceled by both sides of the aisle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we mentioned that you're a video game developer, and that's where I had originally heard your name a few years ago, actually more than a few now, during Gamergate. And I'm wondering if you could help tell our listeners and us even a little bit about Gamergate, what your position was, and, the 5-sentence version, maybe.
Yeah, if you want to know about Gamergate, just watch the Law and Order episode. It's totally factually accurate. What happened is Ice-T rescued me from Logan Paul on a rooftop. I was kidnapped, and then, literally, this was Logan Paul before he was famous, played Gamergate on TV. So he kidnapped me, and then Logan Paul came up, and bam, 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 shot Logan Paul dead and saved me, and everything went well from there. So that's the story of Gamergate. In all seriousness, it was a harassment movement against women in the video game industry. It was really the start of this fringe progressive playbook. This fringe harassment playbook that we see, where if you don't like something someone says, you go through everything they've ever said, you target them, you silence them, and that's kind of what Gamergate was all about.
So just so I'm aware, it was about putting female characters into video games, right?
No, not even close to that. I'm sorry.
Then I'm totally off base.
Totally wrong. Yeah. Gamergate was originally, it started as a backlash against Adina Sarkeesian. The frustration was she had a Kickstarter where she was going to do a feminist analysis on video games, and that upset people. They kind of got a playbook that worked as far as harassing people. They ran it on Zoe Quinn. They ran it on me, and ostensibly it was about ethics in game journalism. The pragmatic reality was it was about women like me basically being targeted with harassment because we are feminists. So that's kind of my perspective on Gamergate.
Do you think the industry has evolved for the better in any way, or they're still working on the same challenges?
I think a lot of the issues that we cared about are completely irrelevant today.
Okay.
In the sense that, the Gamergate side, they really wanted, ethics reform in how games are covered. Well, today, IGN, Polygon, GameSpot, they don't really functionally have much power. So I don't really feel like there's much they need addressed there. As far as like women and how we're treated in the video game industry, marginal changes. There's certainly a few more female game journalists today than there were, 10 years ago. But, can I point to women as studio heads today and say, like, we've really changed this culture? I can't.
So what was your role? You were the head of a video game development company?
Yeah, and they were harassing the crap out of my friends, and I spoke up about that. I've long felt that women do not get a fair shake in the video game industry. It was just a shockingly difficult industry to work in, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, so I think there's another, it's kind of interesting because it's relevant to the most recent episode of your podcast, Dollcast, which is very nice. And you talk about, unfortunately standing up for something, especially in this age and on the internet, comes at extraordinary cost these days. And I think it's interesting that you have the ability to both be a pariah on Twitter as well as one of the most blocked people on Blue Sky. I thought that was pretty interesting. So can you talk to us a little bit about
Do you think I'm a pariah? I think every major public figure is a
that's the
pariah
thing, unfortunately.
on Twitter to some extent.
Once you gain a little bit of notoriety, everyone wants to knock you down a peg or two so they can climb up, right? But so my point being is, and you alluded to this in the beginning of the show, it's just simply because, you have different ideas than me, then that means that we can't be friends. And that's the exact opposite. And that's what we try to show on this program here, is that, we couldn't, disagree more, Cooper and I, but we remain friends and we find the common ground where we can, because at the end of the day, this is the democratic experiment. And that's the only way it works. So what is like for you trying to navigate things these days, and especially with some of, certain beliefs that you hold that put you outside of the, party line of the Democrats?
Well, I mean, everything I'm doing right now in my career is trying to get the Democrats back on course, if that makes sense to you. I think, the Democratic Party goes in phases. And, I'm a little too young to know the Tip O'Neill era of him kind of running the House Democrats and things like that. But, when I certainly know what we were like in like the Bush years. And, I think when Obama won in 2008, that really sectioned a new chapter for the Democratic Party. And we're kind of at the end of that playbook now with Biden having lost. And I think we're looking for a new identity. I think it's a really good time to look at what's working in the party and what isn't. And I think it's really hard for anyone in good faith to deny that the Democratic Party is now the party of elitists. We've really quadrupled down on identity politics, a phrase I thought was BS 5 years ago, but now I think it's been taken to such an insane degree. We can't get normal people to vote for us with this iteration of our party. So, I'm getting some blowback from people, but I also raise a ton of money for Democrats in back channel. And, like everything I'm doing is trying to make us viable so we can win the next presidential election, if that makes sense to you.
It does.
Yeah. So I'd actually be curious to understand, there's a lot of different issues that go on, and Mike and I cover different issues with all of our different guests. I've been following you on X the last couple of days, and one of the things that you've been talking quite a bit about is Israel and Hamas supporters in your ranks in the Democrats. And I'm wondering if that's like, is that a type of person? Is that a type of American, a Hamas supporter? Does that exist?
Yeah, of course it does.
And they associate with the Democratic Party?
It's a huge percentage of the trans movement that's 100% in on this Free Palestine nonsense. And there's very clearly contingency that is extremely sympathetic to this. Rashida Tlaib has power. And, frankly, I think one reason the Democrats lost this election is we were so unwilling to make a moral call and tried to please everyone to win Dearborn, Michigan, which we were never going to win anyway. And I think it just speaks to this spinelessness that's in our party. It really is okay to just say, this is right, this is wrong, these are my values. If you don't like it, go vote for someone else. And just for whatever reason, the Democrats are unable to do that. I think it's really unfortunate.
So you go ahead. Sorry, Cooper, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you intertwined two topics there, which was the Free Palestine movement and the trans movement, and that there's a lot of overlap between the two. We recently interviewed an archaeologist named Flint Dibble, who famously debated Graham Hancock on Joe Rogan, who goes and talks to us about, or talks to people about Atlantis. And it was interesting to me how that became a left versus right conversation, where you find that the overlap of people on the right believe in political misinformation, medical misinformation, and now all of a sudden have led this hunt for Atlantis, which is rooted in racism, people believe. And then the other side is saying, no, we're science, we're history, we're all of this stuff. So it's very interesting that the political aisle lines have aligned with these different causes, if you will. And I'm curious if you can help me understand, why would a trans group or be invested into Palestine or Hamas at all?
Well, I think there is a really big culture on the left. Like, one of the problems is there's no mechanism in progressive politics to put the brakes on bad ideas. So we tend to go further and further and further left. So if you look at where I got into progressive politics 20 years ago, it was because I was like a very poor trans woman trying to save up for vaginoplasty, and I was working minimum wage at GameStop, and I just thought a better system should exist to help me get the health care I needed to move on with my life. I think if you look at it today, we don't talk about universal health care anymore. It's 100% identity politics. So I think it really breaks down into this oppressed dynamic that's very, very simple. And I think the idea is that for a lot of people, that Israel is this 300-pound gorilla, and not the fact that there are 400 million Muslims in this region, 7 million Jews, 9 million Israelis, and there's been a project since 1948 to genocide them. So I think it's this really unfortunate mixture of a culture that silences really critical discussion of this, a lack of information, and just frankly the progressive left being captured by Islamists.
So the thing is, I guess, right, is the progressives tend to root for that underdog, but this narrative has been perverted, and now they see, and you've clearly outlaid the population differences, that it's really that Israel is the underdog. Despite military advantages, they have the entire region after them. I think what it is people start with good intentions, and surely there's perhaps conduct of the war or concerns about Netanyahu's organization of the government and his shift towards a hard right within the their system over there. But to be chanting from the river to the sea, I think you highlighted it perfectly. It's people are ignorant by either willfully or unintentionally, but they don't know what that phrase really means, and they're calling for genocide whether they realize it or not.
It's also just frankly anti-Semitic.
Right.
The tropes that the progressive left have gone into. It's just openly stated. If you support Israel by a lot of progressives, like, you're being bought by the Jews. I get told that I'm like a Hezbollah operative on the payroll probably 50 times a day. It's so openly Jew-hating and just laughable. And it's extremely frustrating from my perspective. I think about when I think about all the Jews that have helped me throughout my life. And, before October 7th, I just had not really thought that much about Israel-Palestine. Like, I supported Israel in like a vague sense, just from the sense like I'm pro-establishment and pro-relationships with other countries. But, I hadn't really thought that deeply about what happened in 1948. And, I really found myself needing to sit down and read through this, because as a public figure, I have to get it right. And I sat down and I read the history, and what I saw over and over again was Israel being attacked. And, and I see this just genocidal project to destroy Israel. And I think anyone who honestly looks at the history will come to the same conclusion I have, that Israel is a flawed country, but directionally they're just trying to survive.
When you say that you get a lot of hate online, I resonate with that, because I was the right-wing guy that talked a lot about election interference and very, whatever hardcore politics of the flavor season was that. Dare I even suggest Q. But now dealing with Mike and trying to read more and study more, as you just suggested too, it's really moderated me. And I'm wondering if you've felt that this anti-Semitism you mentioned you're getting, or even just regular online harassment, is it typically really only from right-wingers that say we hate trans people and we don't want any women? I mean, or do you also get anti-Jew stuff from the left wing?
I'm not even Jewish. I get called every Jewish name in the book you can imagine 100 times a day. It's kind of weird. Like, at this point, I've been called a dirty Jew so much. Like, it kind of lands. Like, it was funny for the first week, but I don't know. It's like today, it's just, it's a little weird. Yeah, just being honest, most of the anti-trans hate, or the hate I get for being a trans woman, it does come from TERFs and right-wingers, certainly right-aligned people that want to push trans people out of public life. There are also a lot of Republicans who've been completely lovely to me and have been fantastic allies. So, you know, I don't want to paint anyone with a broad brush.
I do want to bury down into that, actually, because there was a recent spat with your podcast and J.K. Rowling, actually, with one of your tweets. Maybe you can enlighten our audience a little bit about that saga.
Sure. You know, it was so funny because my show, Dollcast, it is for integrated trans women. You know, trans women that I hope as y'all are talking to me today, you think, oh, this is someone who makes a lot of sense as a woman, right? So it's 3 hosts that are very similar to me. You know, we didn't transition to become political activists. We had a medical condition. We got help for it, and we're just trying to live our lives as best as we can. I've been married to a man for 18 years this year. So, you know, with Dollcast, we had a segment where we were talking about doing our hair. And, you know, this is something like, assuming y'all have wives or girlfriends, like this is something just women do. And it was a segment that we did of just sitting around talking for like 20 minutes about how we take care of our hair every day. Yeah, I tweeted it out and I'm just like, you know, I don't know how anyone could look at this and not say like, this is a normal conversation that women have. And the TERFs went after that, and J.K. Rowling was like, oh, so now you're saying, like, just because you can talk about your hair, like, you're women. And I'm like, no, J.K. Like, what I'm saying is there is a humanity in all of us that I'm asking you to see. That if you forced us to be men, like, none of us would be happy. And that's what I'm asking you to see. So it was a very tough few days on Twitter.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I think it's important because I really appreciate what you do, because you're trying to show, you know, not just I guess you're being the example, right? And it's unfortunate that we all have to kind of be ambassadors sometimes, but I like to try to be the ambassador for, you know, liberalism and show that it isn't just progressivism, right? That's not what leftist politics is all about. I myself find myself as well more of an establishment figure these days, a little bit more centrist in some ways, but you know, it's definitely not what your typical progressive might be, and it kind of surprises some of my right-leaning friends now. So I would say, do you see some voices kind of emerging behind the scenes in the Democratic Party other than yourself that are really trying to moderate it? And do you think they're going to be making progress as we go kind of through this post-mortem in the, you know, the new Trump presidency?
I really wish I could say yes. What I see is a mad scramble for power behind the scenes.
Yes.
And that's not going to make people happy of me saying
Right.
that. I was really happy after the election because a bunch of really high-level people in the party got together and were like, well, what does our trans message need to be? Like, I think there's a really good argument that we lost this election from having a really extreme message on trans stuff, things I don't agree with. And I think the party, what I saw at first was us really sitting down and having some difficult conversations about that. And now it seems to be just very tepid. There's a quality to the Democratic Party from the inside where it's very much, you don't want to be the nail that gets the hammer. So everyone is very, very cautious to make decisions. And I think that's what you're seeing right now. So I hope we have some leadership that will step up. But it's frankly not what I've seen so far.
Do you think that they're just trying to do like a wait and see and kind of allow Trump to maybe make some missteps and then play off of that? Or do you think it, as you said, it's just this power scramble and everyone's just kind of, you know, waiting for the opportune time to seize it?
I think that's it, but isn't that the wrong tactic? Like just waiting for Trump to do some stupid things, which I assume he will. Does this really get our party anywhere? Does running on the idea Trump bad, like we've been doing this since 2016, is this helping our party? Is this what we need to focus on? I think the Democratic Party has no excuse for having lost this election. I'm sorry, Charles, if you're a Trump guy, I'm just voicing my opinion.
No, I think they bungled it up. I was telling Mike up until the week of the election that this is a throwaway. No way Trump.
Of course it is. Of course it is. I think Trump is awful. And the fact that the American people like us even less than him, that's the moment that the bartender's throwing you out of the bar.
Sure.
And you need to understand you've got a drinking problem. And why did we lose this? Fringe trans politics have given the Republicans everything they need to attack people like me, even when it's policies that don't help people like me. We lost because working class people don't associate the Democratic Party for standing for their interests anymore. And frankly, despite losing Roe, abortion is not the only issue that women care about. Being able to afford childcare or groceries. There's a host of whole bread and butter issues that are feminist issues that the Democratic Party just no longer has answers for. So we can spend the next 4 years attacking Trump, and I'm sure a lot of us will. I'm far more interested in building a brand for the Democrats that is relatable and sellable politically.
Yeah, so I think that's necessary.
I'm going to steal the microphone one more time, and then I'll throw it back to Cooper.
No, you're good, Mike. Yeah, I love your questions.
So this one is interesting to me. Why do you think it is that Republicans are more successful in their messaging despite not having the legislative accomplishments their constituency is expecting? So like my example here is that many of the people who are dissatisfied with, quote unquote, what Biden did were not realizing that it wasn't some executive order. This was legislation that was passed through Congress. Mike Johnson's Congress, might I remind a lot of folks. A lot of these bills and the funding to Ukraine, et cetera, that people are dissatisfied happened because of Mike Johnson. Why can the Republicans not deliver a lot on their legislative agendas, whereas the Democrats are held far more accountable for it? What do you think that is?
So I didn't really understand this until I started being an executive director and doing a lot of polling. And I don't mean this arrogantly, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I think people like us really overestimate how much the American people follow politics. I'm not a sports girl. I couldn't tell you one fact about what is our team here, the Patriots.
I don't watch too much sports ball either myself.
You've got the Patriots up there, yes.
I couldn't tell you who our quarterback is. I would struggle to tell you any past quarterback we've had.
Right now, today, you do not want to know who your quarterback is.
Okay, that's fine. My point is, I just don't follow that. And, if you take me to a game, I'll pay attention, and I know enough about football to draw some conclusions and make some decisions, but I just don't follow it. And that's the way that a huge swath of American voters are, that the election will come up and they're going to make their decision that week, but they're not tuned into all these legislative accomplishments. They don't know all the storylines. It's a really vibes-based feeling who is standing for me. And, we're just completely failing that, in my view.
Well, my mom's favorite team is Jacksonville Jaguars because she likes the leopard print and the teal color. So there's that. And imagine showing up at the voting booth that day with that information, though, right?
Sure.
So you said in the beginning of the episode that you are a feminist.
Of course I am.
Is that different than being a trans rights activist? And I'm asking this earnestly. I actually don't understand it because I understand how someone like J.K. Rowling, who is a outspoken TERF, could be against trans people, right? But then a feminist. So can you explain to me maybe your position on how can we fill both of those buckets at the same time?
Well, I don't think feminism is incompatible with trans women. I understand, of course I'm a natal male, but as I go about my life, my chromosomes are not what determines how people interact with me. I think of myself as a trans woman, and most people just treat me as a cis woman. It just doesn't come up. So, when I'm thinking about issue. Like, I don't personally need abortion access, but I think every woman needs the right to control her own body and her own destiny in the same way that I do. I think this is very aligned when it comes to issues like childcare or having fair opportunities at work. I don't see where trans women are the enemies on that. We very much understand how structural oppression can exist. So I, from my point of view, I would say being a TERF is the anti-feminist position.
Interesting. Well, I think I agree with you. And it sounds like being those characteristics just means being a compassionate, empathetic person, which is good.
Yeah.
But actually, I want to bring it back now. So the Democrat Party, and you even said that they have pushed it so far that now you don't even agree with some of the stuff that they're pushing. But you've explained now that really it's, I want to go about my life and have the same rights or the same kind of respect that any other woman would have. Now, the Republicans almost have capitalized. Now, there's definitely the far right element where they throw vitriol, which is not acceptable. But it's almost that they've kind of nailed this one in by not talking about it too much. If you were a right-wing politician, you maybe don't even want to say anything about it. Make it a non-issue. Don't talk about abortion. 100%. Don't talk about trans.
I went 20 years without talking about being trans. I didn't come out until like 4 months ago. And I was like, I ran for Congress. I didn't mention it. I went through Gamergate. I didn't mention it. I'm not going to tell you some people didn't figure out I was trans or go through my entire biography and raise some questions. I just didn't talk about it because I didn't want it to be like, I transitioned to go live my life, not be a activist.
Right.
The problem is that the trans rights movement has gotten so extreme. If we don't have some damned adults like leading this movement, we're going to lose everything. I legitimately wonder if I'm going to have access to HRT, which I need to live by the end of the Trump administration. I wonder if my marriage is going to be legal. You know, there's a lot of stuff that we're really on the wrong course for. So I fully agree with you. There are two schools of thought with trans politics. You have what I would call gender ideology. So gender ideology is this non-binary project. It's saying you can self-ID your gender. It's saying like, you need to announce your pronouns and all this silly stuff. And you have what I would call integrationists. I transitioned to integrate, become the closest version of a woman I could be and go about my life. I had a healthcare issue. It completely ruined my life. I sought healthcare and my life got much better. I think like there's not anyone else in the trans movement willing to stand up and say, gender's not a construct. Gender dysphoria is a medical condition and we need to treat it that way. If you don't have gender dysphoria, you're not trans. That's a very unpopular thing to say in progressive circles, but I think it's the playbook that got us our rights.
I think it's interesting because it's as you tying back to what you said before, the American electorate is not as tied in as punditry likes to believe that they are, and I think digestibility of a message is probably most important. And I think it's great what you do because you are that simplified example. Like you said, I'm just trying to fully integrate. I'm not trying to be this activist, right? It's not about the identity politics. Perhaps, I guess that's the biggest problem here, right? Is it's easy to stereotype when you have such maximalist policies, right? I mean, Kamala Harris was, lampooned as supporting sex changes for immigrant prisoners and things like that. What I didn't see that anywhere on our, policy, agenda, but it's easy to mischaracterize, I should say, the other party when you have those maximalist policies. So I guess your position
actually,
is...
can I push back on you a little bit?
By all means, please do.
Because I don't agree with you on this. And this is a weakness in the Democratic Party. What happened was some fringe progressive gender ideologists, right? We're working for GLAAD or ACLU or any of these organizations have been ideologically captured. And then the Democrats came to kiss the ring of that organization. In that clip, there was a famous television commercial. You've got trans women there, no voice training, no real effort to pass, sitting there on stage going, do you support, and giving the most extreme policies possible. And what did our party do? We went along with it because the gut instinct of the Democratic Party is to people please. That's our fundamental nature. and we gave them the clips to utterly destroy us. So this is a two-way street of fault. You've got completely unserious political activists trying to push the public policy to a stupid point that no American is ever going to support. If you ask the American people, Brianna Wu wants to go to a doctor and get health care and take that risk herself and pay for that surgery herself. Do you support her being able to do that and live her life? That answer is 100% yes. If you're saying this huge immigration problem, they're going to come through the system if they claim to be like trans. We're going to give them vaginoplasty for $30,000 a pop. No one's going to agree with that. It doesn't help like American trans women. So I really don't agree with you. I think that unfortunately the Democratic Party has adopted some really extreme trans views without thinking about it. I think they assume that every single civil rights struggle is just a copy of the 1964 civil rights struggle.
That's very
and
fair.
Not that there could be unique issues at play here.
I think you touched on as well, another big weakness in our party is the immigration issue, right? We were so worried about this Latino vote, and we even tried to push about how Puerto Ricans are going to be so offended now because of that off-color joke that now this election's in the bag. And to everyone's surprise on the left, not many to the right, is that, they're not all monolithic. They can take a joke and, a lot of them still voted for Trump regardless. So
That's right.
I think that's another issue in our party is weakness around immigration. Do you see that conversation or policies changing in any way?
I don't know. Again, you got to have some courage because Look at the immigration issue. This bothers me as a feminist. There is the amount of sex trafficking going on. Like trafficking a woman for sex slavery is vastly more profitable than fentanyl. Like, this is a huge issue. So obviously that border has got to be secured. Like, that's before you get into the work issues or the drug smuggling or the terrorism threat. Before you get to any of this, the Democrats should have been there with the Republicans every step of the way, demanding serious public policy on this. What did we do? We were afraid someone was going to call us racist, and we did nothing and kept our mouth shut. And immigration was one of the top issues that the American people voted on. I'm sorry. The border, any country has to keep its border secure. And it doesn't mean I hate Latino people. It doesn't mean I hate Mexicans. It just means we need an orderly process to figure out when people come into this country. So let's get that done with the Republicans. It's insane that we won't do this.
Well, we talk about it a lot on this show, how the infighting is keeping their jobs alive, keeping them in those halls of or their chambers where they get the insider info and make even more money and speaking deals. Actually, unpopular opinion I've been telling people I think we should increase the pay of these politicians. Let them make $500,000 or more, as long as they can't do that other stuff that takes them away from their job. I want to go back to the last topic. I just finished reading a book. Actually, I have like 20 pages left, but it's Pete Hegseth. I got it for Christmas, and he's been tapped to be the Secretary of Defense. And in his book,
tap is an interesting word to use there.
Tapped, okay, I guess. Why?
Beer tap. I'm sorry, it's a joke about his drinking problem.
Well, anyway, I was going to say his book is very full of rhetoric. It was a little bit challenging for me to read because it was almost like an amalgamation of all of his tweets. But one of the things that he mentioned was kind of what Mike was touching on before, and I'd like to get your stance on it, Brianna. He was saying that the military has such low recruitment lately that they literally came out with a plan to advertise paid for gender transition surgeries in exchange for enlistment. And I'm wondering if that would be similar to what you were just kind of describing as saying, hold on, this maybe goes a little bit further than what we're trying to accomplish here.
Well, I don't know. Like, what is the Army recruitment bonus? It is, $30,000 nowadays? If you're going to give someone like a vaginoplasty, that's $30,000. FFS is going to be $30,000. Like, that doesn't seem insane to me to say to someone, if you want some health care, come serve your country. We'll give you a path there. This is like, Charles, this is where I would really love to say, we need your help. We need conservatives' help. the reason trans people are so neurotic and unfocused right now is because we don't have a job. We don't have a direction. All these progressive ideas are not giving us any pathway to live our life and to go be successful. And all the normal, happy trans women I know are the ones that have jobs. So, I mean, what's better for you that a trans woman, like, you know, stays unemployed and tweets nonsense all day on 4chan harassing people, or that she goes and serves her country and gets some health care and learns some skills and learns how to integrate a little better? Like, what's the argument against that? Help me understand.
I guess the argument that he made in the book is following a procedure like that, it's weeks and weeks of recovery time.
Oh God, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't exactly be an active
Fair.
duty as soon as you do that. In fact, I think he was explaining, and I probably misquoting, I read through it quickly, but it was out of a 2-year enlistment, I think almost 1 full year of that becomes medical leave then as soon as you join.
No, I've done this. It's not that much. Like,
No, and I'm not
Yeah.
arguing with you. I'm just explaining
Yeah.
that this was one of the, like, literally of maybe 7 or 8 chapters in the book. That was a full
Sure.
chapter of his. And to say that this was a ploy almost to increase the recruitment numbers. Now, you said that it's good, and I agree with you. I think it would be great to have jobs the same.
I understand it's politically dynamite, to be clear. I just, that's my perspective on it.
Yeah,
I think you'll find it interesting and I appreciate how you frame this as a healthcare issue, because it becomes a qualifier, right? Because then it's not just those who choose to self-identify because of how they currently feel, but folks who really are on a journey, because you could tell everyone firsthand it's a journey. It's not something that you just choose overnight and that you can get overnight, and the recovery process is very lengthy. But one of our recent guests that we had on was John Hoops, who although is certainly a liberal scholar, his father, believe it or not, was a very prominent conservative medical surgeon who performed, I think it was, right, correct me if I'm wrong, Cooper, but one of the first, trans surgeries, reassignment surgeries. Yeah. So it's very interesting because that's exactly how he framed it too. And this is where I think conservatives can get back to it, is we treat it as a healthcare, issue. We're helping an individual. It's not just something chose on a whim or, as a fad.
But that's the whole problem, is framing. So, I don't want to get into deep trans politics here. I'll try to keep it simple. But there are two warring factions in trans politics. You've got, trans medicalists, which are me. Yeah, I think this is a medical condition. I don't think it's a construct. I think you go into the DSM is literally a mental health disorder, and you go and get treatment, and then you don't have that disorder because your gender is in alignment with your social role, and you go on with life. And that's one faction. I would say, unfortunately, the majority of trans people today, it's this gender ideology, non-binary, create a gender, don't need this to be trans, get rid of all medical gatekeeping. When I transitioned, I wish people understood this. It was 20 years ago. There was a process that you had to go through. People don't understand. You had to have a job for a year to get vaginoplasty, a literal job. Today, you can just go out and do whatever and get all this stuff instantly. And, unfortunately, framing it as a healthcare issue, most trans people do not agree with that today, which is insane to me.
Yeah, I think there's a large contingency on the right that would say that you use the word mental health issue, right? And they would say, well, then let's do mental health treatment. And then there's the other contingency on the right that says, or it's more libertarian likely, that says, well, it's their body, it's their right, let them do that. I think that's probably where I fall. And then the argument that starts is when they start talking about kids or putting it in schools, or what age is it appropriate to have this happen? Is that maybe what you referred to at the beginning of the episode? Said, oh, well, it's gone too far, and this might be one of those things.
That's parts of it. I do want to say, a Republican can say, oh, it's a mental health care issue, go treat it. Do you, both of you have met me, do you think there's any version of me that's healthy, mentally healthy, that's not like this, that's not talking like this or living like this? This is who I am, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's,
this
you
is
seem
the
happy
mental
and
health care, right?
I mean, that's how you frame it too. Is it's this wasn't like a decision because I want to. It's I need to. If I don't pursue this life, it becomes unlivable in, my past life. I think that's what most folks don't understand. And I think it's easier to criticize people you don't meet. So again, I appreciate you for making yourself so visible, because as you talked about on your most recent episode of your podcast, is people do just want to lay low and they just want to integrate.
Of course.
But unfortunately, I don't think there's enough examples out there. So it becomes easier to mischaracterize folks when they don't have that in front of them.
I knew something was really wrong with me when I was 3 years old. And I was so, my body just felt so off. And the older I got, the more I just felt with every part of my being that I cannot even begin to explain to you that I was not supposed to be a boy. And it was so traumatic to me and frustrating. And I tried so hard to fit in. I genuinely did. I tried playing soccer, and they tried to force me to be a boy, and it just made me so depressed to the point, like, if you look at my wrist, you'll see like cuts on there from trying to kill myself when I was 12. The instant I left home, I started doing every drug I could get my hands on. And like, I don't know how I lived long enough to transition. I was a mess. When I went to rehab, the amount of drugs I was doing daily is just insane. And I got clean, I transitioned, and then instantly my life turns around. 5 years later, I'm a national figure. And it's like, this just, I understand it's weird for people, but I cannot live as a man. I can't do it. I cannot fit in that social role. It makes my brain break. It makes me unhappy. Testosterone just makes my brain feel like it's short-circuiting, and estrogen it's like going from having a malfunctioning computer to 64 colors to see the world with. It just agrees with me in ways I can barely explain to you. And I just wish more people understood, like, this isn't something I did for fun. It's something I did to survive.
Well, thank you for sharing that for us. It was very touching. And I think what's really important, and I don't want to transition away just because it was a heavy note, but I think it's important because, as you said, this was an important step for you to integrate. And maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the success in your career and things that you're doing now, and maybe dig into a little bit about the nuts and bolts of what fundraising is. Because again, although most Americans are not tuned into politics, we love the nitty gritty. So I think it's important that, we tell our audience a little bit about how fundraising actually works, and how it is kind of the lifeblood of campaigns.
Oh my God. So I do it all with my PAC. I produce television commercials. I raise money, whether that's crowdfunding through, through emails, or, calling individual high dollar donors, or building relationships, or, getting, applying to foundations for specific programs. There's all kinds of ways to politically fundraise. So it's ultimately about trust, and it's about relationships. One of the things I feel very strongly is, if you want to drive somewhere, you need some gas in that car. So, I just feel really like I enjoy this part of the job. It's fun for me to develop those relationships. And people think it's like, you're talking to people, like, just trying to get that money from them. It's not like that at all. It's like you're talking to people, you're like, what's important to you? Like, we'll take the Israel issue, right? There's a lot of money out there right now to really support candidates that are pro-Israel, because there's a constituency that wants to see that represented in Congress. So this is really my job, is just going around and making friends all day and finding out where I'm aligned with people, if that makes sense.
It does.
I see in your bio that you also were a supporter of the Green New Deal. That was a main platform position for when you ran. Don't you?
Back then.
Our feeling is it might cost a little bit too much money, no?
I think one of the things I've come to the conclusion on with the progressive movement, this is after spending a decade of my life working on this, is they're not serious about public policy. So I can look at something like the Green New Deal and go, okay, I can see how this will take us in the right direction. The problem is progressives are so divisive. We'll never get the Republicans to vote for it, and we're not going to get the Democrats to vote for it. So I just think, like, iteration and working with Republicans is the way to go today.
Very interesting. I mean, I personally, in the last I guess it was like 5 months ago, 6 months ago, removed the word Republican from my bio, which had been there on Twitter for many years. I didn't disassociate from the party, and I'm still a proud Republican, but I didn't want to have that monolithic label. And it almost seems to me like, are you thinking at all that you would separate from the Democratic Party?
No. I respectfully, like, if we're a Republican, we can be friends, but
It's
Democrats are the ones that got me the rights I need to live. And generally speaking, like, the Republican Party is the home to transphobes. And there's no issue that matters more to me than healthcare and access to HRT and being able to use the bathroom and just go about my day. So
Fair enough. Well, I'm on your side on this one, Brianna.
So I want to bring up a little some tweets that you've been pushing out there recently, and a hill that you seem to be choosing to die on. Walkable cities and how nobody wants them. Maybe you could tell a little bit us about what's been going on with
so
that.
y'all know I collect Porsches, right?
Absolutely, I do at least. Yeah.
Okay. I grew up in Mississippi. I'm a car girl. I love my classic Porsches. So I think like walkable cities is one of these progressive things where they're always going like more bike lanes. Let's make everything walkable. I think at the end of the day, like maybe these people just grew up in New York or California and don't know what it's like in Mississippi. There's no future in Mississippi where it's walkable cities. I'm sorry, y'all.
I think also too is people think that bike lanes automatically create a walkable city, but they don't realize that there's this infrastructure and culture that kind of has to be built into it, other than just a few bike lanes here and there that obstruct traffic. But we can leave that there then.
I was blinded to it. I lived in New York and Queens with my wife for 8 years before buying a house in the suburbs in Connecticut. And, you know, we would circle for parking for 40 minutes after a 3-hour drive home from the in-laws. And we would have to buy $150 worth of groceries, which is only 2 days worth. And you have to huff it home 3 blocks with a dog in the snow. I mean, the second I pulled into my driveway and I was able to unload groceries from my trunk, you know, that was like, you don't even realize what you're missing. So yeah, you need a car. I'm with you on that one.
I'm just saying, like, I enjoyed living in DC as a staffer. I'm just saying, like, I would have to hike like through the snow and the rain, like 4 or 5 blocks to go get coffee if I was out. And then I'd have to come back to my apartment and do it. And it was fun. I enjoyed being able to get as trashed as I wanted at the clubs and take the metro home. That was fun. But I just don't think most Americans are going to live this way.
Right.
Sorry.
Pragmatically, yeah, it's just not functional in the grander scale of things.
Like, you've got kids. If you've got kids, you think you're going to go every time you need some diapers?
Oh,
you're gonna...
I know all about that.
You're still in a city, Mike. I'm out. Thank goodness.
Yeah, no, it's brutal though having to do it. Yeah, it's a car city though. I'm down in Miami, by the way, for perspective. So it's not a walkable city by any means. In fact, it's quite dangerous to get on your bicycle or on foot here. I would always recommend being in a car.
Anyway, listen, hey, Brianna, where can people find you, your new podcast, or on social media, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, my favorite place is unfortunately Twitter, because I'm a sycophant for punishment
not
and
X,
bad
Twitter,
decisions.
right? It's always been Twitter. It will stay Twitter.
If he stops dead naming his daughter, I will stop dead naming his social media
There you
service.
go. There you go. I like that.
Yes, but I'm primarily on Twitter. I'd really ask people to check out my show Dollcast. You know, it's I feel like there's really nothing out there with normal trans women with jobs and boyfriends and husbands and, you know, just talking about this stuff in a real way. I mean, I assume you guys saw the Jank show. Like, what did you think? Like, just seeing like normal trans women.
Well, like that's what I said. It's exactly what you need to be doing, is kind of breaking the stereotypes and not giving people an opportunity to mischaracterize, and just show that you're just trying to live the life like everybody else and just get by, right? That's what we're all doing, is just trying to make it, you know?
Yeah, and actually you taught me the word right now, the integrated trans person. I didn't even know. In fact, when I was watching Dollcast, I was not sure. I was not sure if it was all for trans women. So you got me fooled, I guess, there.
There we go.
Yeah.
So that's the goal.
Is there a sneak peek into any future programming you got planned, or any upcoming guests you want to...
We got some really big guests coming up. It's really good that everybody wants to come on and have some more conversations about trans politics. So it's really exciting to have some of the biggest people eager to work with us on this.
Awesome.
Well, that's awesome. And congratulations. Like, you filled that space, right? That was a void that was needed. And hopefully that's what we're trying to do here as well. But that's why we're so grateful to have featured your voice here today, understand a little about your story. And Mike, is there anything else I missed?
No, I think we finished on a perfect note. Like I said, go watch Dollcast. It was the great last episode, and I'm looking forward to future upcoming ones.
Amazing. We're arguing a Tim Pool's booker this week, Lisa Elizabeth, who's a hardcore conservative who does not think trans women should have kids. And oh boy, it got spicy.
This should be very interesting then. I'll definitely tune in.
Well, now I'm going to drag it out. Is the argument that, what is the argument? Shouldn't have kids, that it doesn't have the nuclear family influence?
I think that's it. Yeah. She's very pro. She doesn't believe in surrogacy or adoption. And, I think she didn't understand that Skylar has her original equipment and has a wife. So no surrogacy is involved. So
right.
It does show the... I don't want to offend anyone by saying small-mindedness, but it's just that people on the right maybe are hesitant to even look into it and understand that that's a possibility, right? It didn't even click for that person that, that could happen. It's just strange that understanding doesn't exist yet. So
I have this opinion until it affects me personally, and then I have to deal with it in a different way is usually how I see it.
So before we go, I want to ask y'all really directly, what is your opinion on trans stuff? Let's get into it. Well, Charles, you're the Republican. What is your opinion on trans people? Are trans women in your view?
I don't personally have a problem with the bathroom stuff or with, I heard in your episode with Jank that sports was kind of the generally accepted, hey, maybe we should deintegrate this.
That's so stupid.
I'm very torn on it, to be completely honest.
Really?
I really am. It doesn't personally affect me, right? Maybe it will affect my kids or my family one day, so I am interested in it. But I think that if I were to walk into a locker room and there was, I'm the man, I'm not the female, to see a trans woman walk in. But if I were to see a trans man walk in, I maybe would give it a glance. But I think that my method is to be head down in a locker room anyway. I don't really go to spas or get massages. That's where you might see locker rooms. Honestly, I don't know. I don't have a very strong position. I think like what you said before, if you were so unhappy that you couldn't continue day to day, and this is now where you found happiness, then that's an outright positive. The thing that I guess is in the back of my head is, what if you go ahead and make that change and go through that process, but then you are not happy with the result?
Yeah.
Right. And I suppose that could happen with just plastic surgery in general, right? You could have a nose job and not like it. But this one seems a little bit more final. And especially when you start HRT, and maybe you'll correct me, I don't know if you can get off it, right? You go on Ozempic, you're on it for life. Can you detransition? Is that a thing? And that's what the right has pushed forward, the detransitioners, to say, these are the stories we need to push. These are more prevalent than the suicides. Again, I don't know where the statistics lie, but that would be what my thought is. It's a very, right, they say this about suicide, it's a very permanent solution to a potentially temporary problem. But again, that's just my uninformed opinion.
Okay, so let's go through this one at a time. First of all, like, the locker room issue is important because, like, I hope I can just be honest. Like, I have a vagina. I had vaginoplasty. I didn't want those parts. I was thrilled to get that surgery, right? Not only because I enjoy dating men. So that works out very nicely. But not all trans women do. One of the things that's changed is, I think, probably most trans women nowadays are into women, which, okay. So because of that, a lot of them keep their penises. And I personally don't think a woman should ever see a penis in a locker room. I think that's really inappropriate and gross and probably would make her feel unsafe. So, I think that's where, just being honest, I could go in a locker room. I don't think anyone would notice or care. But I think, like, the thing is, the community has changed. So, like, the good sense that we showed, that if you didn't pass, you didn't go in those spaces, those days are gone. And you do have people like the progressive messaging is you're entitled to this space. So they go in. They've got a beard. They'll go in, chest hair, original equipment, all that kind of stuff. So it is a problem. And it's a problem that the progressives have been pushed. As far as detransitioners, this is another problem that the progressives have created. Because when I went through the system, I'd have 3 months of therapy and, I had to go get letters and then have a doctor sign off on it for HRT. And then I had to live for a while. There were a whole bunch of steps I had to go through with medical practitioners there every step of the way. Charles, if you wanted to transition today, come on over. I'll take you to Planned Parenthood. We'll get you on anti-androgens that day.
That's
and
crazy,
estrogen.
yeah.
They've just completely short-circuited it. So, of course, when you do that, there are going to be more detransitioners who this doesn't work out for. So, again, this is the problem, is all those things the Republicans are saying, they're true. And they're a problem now because of the progressive policies.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, you mentioned that you had started this process at the age of 12. Obviously, you knew
no, I didn't transition until my mid-20s, but I knew what I was back then. I stole a bunch of my mom's estrogen back then.
Oh, gosh. Well, that's what I meant to say, that you knew. But that would be my next question, would to say, what is an age, or when does it get to a point where it's, I must intervene, I must do this, this is the only option for me, right? And for example, in Oregon, and I'm probably messing up my stats, but in Oregon, a child could do it without parental consent at the age of 14. Whereas in California, I think it's 16, they can begin to seek HRT treatment, right? I'm wondering if there's an age, or is there a need to draw a line, or, what's your stance on that? Because that's another, when we talk about kids, when we talk about schools, you're going to really rile up a lot of right-wingers for sure.
So let me give you some context, because people are really confused on this. So the answer I'm going to give you is going to piss off everyone. So when I transitioned, the rates were male to female. People like me were the overwhelming majority. I met, I think, one FTM the entire time I transitioned. Today, those numbers are flipped, and the overwhelming majority of trans people are women or girls. They've decided that they're men and want to transition. This is actually a much less studied phenomenon. I can show you history books of Roman times of male to female transsexuals castrating themselves to become priests. We have always existed, boys that want to be girls, but this FTM thing is just less studied. It is an entirely different phenomenon, and it's mixed up because you have girlfriends and wives, you've talked to them when you're developing and menstruating and all of that, you feel weird about your body. Of course, there's a lot of pressure to, there are a lot of reasons to want to escape structural sexism. So here's what we know. The number of these young girls that are deciding they're trans is through the roof. It's unprecedented in any generation. There's no scientific basis for explaining it. And I'm of the opinion that the detransition rate for these girls is so sky high through the roof. We need to take them off the table. Just take it off the table. Testosterone is so powerful that they will end up passing just as well if they start testosterone at 15 or 25.
Right.
Just take it off the table. It's just too dangerous, and we know too little about this. The problem that I have is looking at what is happening to the FTMs, because it made my life a lot harder having gone through male puberty. If you look at the DSM, even as a child, there's 6 criteria. I very easily hit every single 6 of those. There's no future where I was not going to grow up and be trans. And I told my parents that from a young age. So what I think we need to do is take FTMs off the table, which will take 80% of the problem away. And I think we need to radically raise the standards for these children and say, look, it's not 2 hours of therapy. It is 2 years of therapy.
Right.
And in these extreme cases with suicidal ideation and a very long documented history, then we can keep a little window open for you. For the extreme cases, and I'm talking kids that are exactly like I was, trying to kill themselves at 12 years old. I think that makes sense to me, and to give everybody mental health care support. But it doesn't need to be all or nothing thinking here. We really can have a nuanced public policy here.
That's a very interesting point. In fact, I think you said everyone would disagree with you. Maybe Abigail Schreier would agree with you on that one.
I know she will.
Yeah.
I'm having lunch with her in a couple of days.
Yes,
Awesome.
That's cool. I was going to ask if you've read her book. I haven't, but I saw her on Rogan, and I was very interested that social contagion in a way, right? And I think that's what you've illustrated.
100% true. There's a social contagion going on with MTFs right now. I 100% believe that. Something's changed about the community, y'all. It just is so different.
Would you say it's just probably moving with the Overton window, and it's an unfortunate product of the times, right? Just, I guess, postmodernism, right? What is the meaning of everything? It's kind of the challenges we face as a society. But I appreciate you having these honest conversations, because this is, similar with race relations in our country. It really boils down to a lot of us just not having the hard conversations that we need to have, right? So we appreciate a voice like yours.
Of course. Thanks, Mike. Sorry to keep you up babbling.
No, absolutely not. This is what we were here for. So we appreciate you for digging that up.
Yeah. All right. So you said your website, you said your handle, all that kind of stuff. Dollcast. Go check them out. Brianna Wu, not Brianna, Brianna. Thank you for joining us. It was our pleasure. And this has been Elevated Thoughts.